Well, in October, we are going to start our course on Beowulf, and we'll be reading from the Seamus Heaney translation from 2000, and this is a really great translation, but there are other really good translations. And so in this video, I want to share 5 really great translations. A good translation, as Matthew Arnold says in his essay on translating Homer, he says that a good translation is going to not only preserve the literal words, but also the effect communicated, especially when translating poetry. Poetry is about the language, and it's also about the effect, the atmosphere, and the feeling that's coming through the language. And this is a very difficult thing to do, but translating poetry is an impossible and often thankless task. But I think we have 5 really great translators of Beowulf who communicate a very literal, faithful rendition along with a very faithful communication of the effect in the spirit of Beowulf. So before we begin, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to read a passage from the Old English. One of my favorite passages when Grendel, the monster, is coming off the moors to Hrothgar's home to kill his men, as he's done many times before. But what Grendel doesn't know is that Beowulf and his men are waiting there for him. And so there's this sinister moment where Grendel is creeping off the moors. So I want to read that in the Old English, so you get a sense of what it sounded like in this very ancient English, which was spoken around the 7th century all the way up to the 11th century. And so it's very different from the English we have today, but it's so textured. And then I want to compare 5 translations of how these other translators have rendered this passage. And as I go, after I read this passage, I'll also go through and translate a bit, so you get a sense of how this poem's working. Now, first thing to say is we obviously are not reading the Old English in this course. We're going to be reading this very accessible version by Seamus Heaney. But in case you're interested in what Old English would have sounded like, also called Anglo-Saxon, here's that passage I just described. Va kom of mora, unter mistiliothum, Grendel gongen, goras ire bär. Minti se manshatha, manas kunis sumna besirven, in Siladamhean. Word under walknum, to thus that he win wretched, gold sile gumena, yer worst wisse fatnum fanne. Ne was that forma sith that he Hrothgares ham jesota, nefra he on alder dagum, erne sithin hedren halla, hel thaganas fan. Kom that to wretcheda rink, Scythian dreamum bedaled, duru sono ornum verbindum fast, Scythin he hera folmum athran, onbrad. Da, belohudig, da he, jabolgen was, wretchedes muthen, Raffa afathon on vanja flor feunt treroda era irimod. Him of egam stod, lia jalikos, leot, on fire. Amazing passage, amazing example of Old English poetics, and I've talked about this passage before in previous lectures, so if you want a literary analysis of this, you can go and find that there. Now, I'm not a scholar of Old English, and I can't translate it perfectly, but I do have some Old English grammar textbooks that I've studied, and so when I come to a passage I really like, I'll sometimes consult those books, and that's what I've done for this. I want to show you how, in a way, similar Anglo-Saxon or Old English is to our modern English. Tha kom off mora, then came off the moor, under mist bands, or the misty hills, misty slopes. Grendel gongen, Grendel was going. God's ire bear, God's ire bearing God's ire. Ire is, we have this word in English, it just looks different. Ire. It's the root of irritate, to make angry. So he's bearing the wrath of God as he's going off the moor under the mistbands. You can see how this lovely preposition, which we all know and love, actually was completely intact. Comes to us across many centuries, completely unscathed, to use in Old English word, because scathe, which means to hurt, is what Grendel wants to do. Mintis e manshatha, a meaning to man hurt, to hurt man. Shatha is where we get scathed. Mintis e manshatha, mana kunis, mankind. So he's meaning to scathe mankind. Sumna besirin. Some are one, or some to ensnare or trap. In the hall, sila means hall, tham hean. Sila, that is high. So Herod's hall, or Hrothgar's hall, is high. And in this passage here, wode unto Walknam, so sinister. Wode means to advance. Wode unto Walknam, to thus that he windreche. So he's walking or advancing under the clouds to the wine building windreche, gold sila gumena. So here we have a compound noun. We know gold. That comes to us. We know that well. And we remember sila to mean hall. So the wine building, the gold hall of men. J.R.R. wissa. That he knew before. J.R.R. wissa. So he's been here before. And you see here, wissa, it comes back to the root of wisdom. It's knowledge. In German you have wissen. So it shares that as well. Fatnum fana, shining plates or buckets or cups. A fat was a container, like a bottle or something. Ne was that forma sith that he Hrothgaris ham Jesota. Never before, since he sought Jesota, Hrothgar's home. Never he in all his life days, before nor after, hard luck, Headren hala, or hall, hail, thanes, theanas, found. So never before had he found this place so well guarded with thanes. Comvatu recheres rink, sitien, dreamum bedalid, he wants to hurt. Dora, he comes to the door. Doru, sona, onarn, breaks it open, firbindum fast. The door is locked real tight with fire-made iron. Sometimes some translators will see this as like the door is made fast by firebrands. It's more like the fire-made iron. Sithin, he here folumum athrin onbrai. That Beowulf, he wants to do hurt, that he Diabolican was, wretchedest Muthin, he's very angry, he's broken open the door, just at a single touch it's burst open. And then he's Ratha. He's moving quickly now over the floor. And notice that when Grendel is moving quickly over the patterned floor, treading, the fiend was treading. Notice how quickly the meter starts picking up. So the poetry, the music, is actually enacting the motion going on here. And this just goes to show just how much of an excellent poet the Beowulf poet was. Raffel afathon on fanja flor fiund treroda ere ire mod. And here you have the ire again, ire. Him of Egam stood, him of his eyes there stood, like a burning, ugly fire, glowing with an unfair light, really. Leot, light, unfair. Fair means beautiful. Unfair means, of course, ugly. So that's how that renders. A rough translation there, but you can see how some of our words actually have a few ancestors here in the Old English. Now let's go to our translators. Some of the best ones, the top 5, I'd say, that I really enjoy. And we'll go chronologically. So let's go to the Victorian poet William Morris. His translation of Beowulf, published in his Kelmscott Press in 1895. I would recommend looking up on Google some of the images of this book. It's absolutely gorgeous. I believe woodcuts that he had made himself to decorate the book. So he translates Beowulf this way. And the language here is fantastic. He preserves both the textures of the Old English that you just read in modern English. Sometimes the word order is a little tortured, a little complicated, but I actually think that that's something that makes this translation beautiful. Came then from the moorland, all under the mist bents, Grendel a-going there, bearing God's anger. The scather, the ill one, was minded of mankind, to have one in his toils from the high hall aloft. Neath the welkin he waded. Notice how Morris is really translating this faithfully according to the poetics. I mean, alliteration, assonance, and consonants are very important to Old English meter. You can see that in an early lecture I did last year. But he's even preserving the exact letters and sounds. Wold unto Wokenham, neath the welkin he waded, he renders to the place whence the wine-house wind wretched, the gold hall, gold sealer, gumina of men. Most yearly he wist. And notice how this root, he's such a great translator. The wist here. Yer worst wisa is carried over here, and most yarly he wist. Oh, that's a fantastic line. With gold plates, fair coloured, nor was it the first time that he unto Hrothgar's high home had betook him, never he in his life days, either erst or thereafter, of warriors more hardy, or hall things had found. Hail Thanas. He really translates that perfectly. Came then to the house the wight on his ways. Oh, what a phrase, the wight on his ways. It's so terrifying. Of all joys bereft, and soon sprang the door open. Doru sono onarn, with firebrands made fast, firbindum fast. I mean, you can hear. Oh, you can just hear the Anglo-Saxon. It's like this is just coming straight from the smoke-haunted rafters of some old hall of the ancient times. William Morris just brings us there. When with the hand he touched it, break the bale he with Rathbolan, the mouth of the house there, and early thereafter. Oh, just this, the rhythm of that. I mean, he's such a great poet. The mouth of the house there, and early thereafter. On the shiny flecked floor thereof trode forth the fiend. And on he went mood wroth, ire mod. And by the way, that old English word mod, I just want to go back here, is where we get the word mood. And Morris knows this, so he translates ire mod into mood wroth, mood angry. And out of his eyes stood likest a fire flame, light full unfair. I mean, there's no closer translation I think you can get than this line. Liga gelikos leat un fire, likest to fire flame full unfair. You could hear the texture so beautifully communicated here in this passage. So this is why William Morris remains one of my favorite translations of Beowulf. But let's go further in time, and let's go to someone who is very much influenced by William Morris, and that is J.R.R. Tolkien. Here we are with Tolkien's translation that he used when teaching Beowulf in the 1930s. You'll notice this is not a poetry translation. This is in prose. He came now from the moor under mist fells, grindle walking. The wrath of God was on him. Foul thief, he purposed of the race of men someone to snare within that lofty hall. Under cloud he went to where he knew full well that house of wine was, hall of men with gold bright plated. Not the first adventure that he had made, seeking for Hrothgar's home. Never in days of life before nor later with harder fortune guards in hall he found. He came now to the house, the man-shape journeying of men's mirth shorn. Also fantastic phrase. Nice balance here. The man-shape journeying of men's mirth shorn. The door at once sprang back, barred with forged iron, when claws he laid on it. He wrenched the wide baleful with raging heart the gaping entrance of the house, then swift on the bright patterned floor the demon paced. In angry mood he went, and Tolkien too knows. Ire mod translates that angry mood he went, and from his eyes stood forth most like to flame unholy light. And you can see a couple differences here in what Tolkien's doing. It's a little bit more religiously informed to say in unfair light is unholy, but it works, especially with his use of the word demon here. A little bit of some religious diction here. What I found really interesting about this translation and why it's not the one I'm teaching from is Tolkien will often prefer a prepositional phrase instead of the compound noun. For example, instead of mankind, he says race of men. Instead of God's wrath, he says wrath of God. Where else do we see? Oh, house of wine instead of the wine house, which is what the Anglo-Saxons would have done. They would just use the compound noun. But he's kind of giving it this Latinate elevation, which I think he was trying to show his students how high and how beautiful and how worthy this poem is, and how much it belongs in the company of the epic poems like Milton, or those of Milton, or some of the great translations that were coming out at the time of classic epics. So I think that's partly why he's doing that. It doesn't sound like Anglo-Saxon in the way that Morris's does, but it's still a great translation. Now, let's go to Burton Raffel's rendering of this passage. Burton Raffel's 1963 translation. We're back into poetry again, or at least it's lineated. Here we have Raffel. Out at the marsh from the foot of misty hills and bogs, bearing God's hatred, Grendel came, hoping to kill anyone he could trap on his trip to the high Heorot. That's the name of Hrothgar's hall. You can see he's playing with alliteration here. Trap on his trip to the high Heorot. He moved quickly through the cloudy night, up from his swamp land, sliding silently toward that shining hall of gold. He had visited Hrothgar's home before, knew the way. And I love how he adds that here. He knew the way, but never before nor after that night found Heorot defended so firmly, his reception so harsh. He journeyed forever joyless. Again, he's playing with the music here beautifully, trying to communicate the music, which is important to do. Straight to the door, and snapped it open, tore its iron fasteners with a touch, and rushed angrily over the threshold. He strode quickly across the inlaid floor, snarling and fierce. His eyes gleamed in the darkness, burned with a gruesome light. So where Morris will translate unfair, literally unfair, Tolkien will say unholy, Burton Raffel will go with the gruesome, which is something I think is particular to his portrayal of the monster here, of the demon. So Raffel in his own way is trying to preserve some of those textures of the Old English, while also maintaining a certain economy. Next we'll go to Seamus Heaney's, which is just fantastic as well, and this is what we'll be reading in the course. And his rendering is, in off the moors, down through the mist bands, God-cursed Grendel came greedily loping. Oh, and I think this is just superlative. Loping, that verb, not just walking, not just journeying. Loping, it gives Grendel this sort of disproportion that is so sinister. Bane of the race of men roamed before. See, Heaney's not shy of using the prepositional phrase either, but he'll also use these compound nouns like cloud murk. Neath the welkin he waded, is what Morris would say here. Ward under Walknum. Seamus Heaney will go, under the cloud murk he moved towards it until it shone above him a sheer keep of fortified gold, nor was it the first time he had scouted the grounds of Hrothgar's dwelling, although never in his life, before or since, did he find heart or fortune or hall defenders. Spurned and joyless, he journeyed on ahead. And Heaney's also really respecting here the Anglo-Saxon poetics of the caesura, separating the two stresses of the line with the alliteration, and arrived at the bawn. The iron-braced door turned on its hinge when his hands touched it. Then his rage boiled over. He ripped open the mouth of the building, maddening for blood, pacing the length of the patterned floor with his loathsome tread, while a baleful light, like that, different, flame more than light, flared from his eyes. Now, so we've read 2000 now, let's go to 2020 with Maria Ivana Headley's translation. This is the one that begins, Bro, hidden by fog, Grendel roved the moors, God cursed, grudge worsening. Here's a little invention that she adds here, grudge worsening, which adds, I find that Headley's monsters have a certain psychological dimension about them that is often absent from the translations, and seems to be certainly absent from the original Anglo-Saxon. But it's a nice little complexity that she adds here, the grudge worsening. He knew who he hunted. Wine drunk and mead met men. Notice those compounds here, very Anglo-Saxon. And he pined for his prey. Under storm clouds he stalked them in his usual anguish, feeling a forbidden hearth, that gilded hall atop the hill, gleaming still through years of bloodshed. It's good. She's working with the alliteration, with the assonance and the consonants as well. This was not the first time he'd hunted in Hrothgar's hall. We noticed those alliterations too, but never before nor later had he such hard luck. And that's an excellent, I think, Heldegarnas fund. No one worthy had historically lain in wait. I don't know. I never. It's an interesting line, this one. The warrior worked his way toward the war. Notice the beautiful preservation of the alliteration here. His head and heart hurting. Another psychological dimension that she gives to this creature, to Grendel. And arrived at the Iron Cross door. Its hinges howled a welcome. I just love the personification that she'll often give to her translations. Howled a welcome in his rage, ratcheted up. Such a great phrase, too, which has a delicious kind of interplay of consonants. He flung the hatch wide and leapt into the mead room, over decorated floors, into the hall, fury frothing. His heart crowed as he counted them, man by man, nested together, roosting like roasting chickens. He'd be the sort of fox that stalks in the night. Now this bit here is Headley's invention. Beautiful, by the way. Invention is very much consistent with kind of furthering the tradition of the Anglo-Saxon poetics. But she actually doesn't preserve the light in his eyes. And I wonder why. I wonder if she wants to draw our attention to the psychological aspects of Grendel and not his body, perhaps. Whatever the reason, I find it really interesting and have no problem with it. A lot of people were like, I don't like the license she takes, or the permission she gives herself to translate a little loosely or to invent herself. I think it's great. She's participating in the whole tradition. That's what this translation does. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of an overview on just how different translations can be. And you might even already have a good sense of what kind of translation you would be attracted to. Whether a more literal one, whether a more kind of imaginative one that's more colloquial, like Headley's, or maybe something a little bit more high and poetic, like Heaney or Raffel, or maybe something a little more antiquated, like William Morris and J.R.R. Tolkien's translations. So I hope you'll join us for this course. We're going to be reading through the entire poem of the Heaney translation on Verse. You can find more info about that below in the link. Thanks for watching, and until next time.